Why Gary Vee said that 97 to 99% of NFTs would go to zero, and what it means going forward for 2023 and beyond. This blog post that Gary Vee put out was spectacularly written, and I want to give some commentary around it and my thoughts, not only about what he was saying today, but what he was saying at the time and how I felt and thought about things. So let's get through, and I'll put the a link in the description for this article of Gary Vee's. Okay, so basically what he did was he tweeted, and this is, what's great about him is he likes to put things on record, right? What he says is about he wants to show conviction rather than trying to convince anybody. And conviction means you put it out there for the world to see, and it's time-stamped. And so when you look here, it says, this was a post that he wrote, a tweet that he wrote November 21st, it was 98 to 99% of NFT projects from this 2021 NFT year will end up being bad investments. Please be thoughtful. This is a gold rush and 99 to 2000 internet stock eras. Some big winners, but a lot of carnage. Play with what you can afford to lose. He goes on to say that 98 to 99% of the current NFT profile pick projects will have a very challenging time to maintain the value of their NFTs at the current prices, and most will go to zero. This is important to understand. This doesn't mean consumer NFTs are a fad. It's the opposite. It's just the reality. And that's in January 12th of 2022. So here's the thing. I remember when he said this. Actually, in the moment when he said it. Or at least around that time. And what's crazy is it registered, but it didn't register. Now, we can sit here and look in hindsight and say, yeah, we all knew it was going to go the way that he's saying it was. But that's not what the mentality was at that time. November 21st was literally the peak of Bitcoin, right? Between November 11th and November 21st, somewhere in that time frame. And so people were still thinking, me being one of them, that Bitcoin was going to hit 100K. We were just approaching 70K, 70,000 US. So there was still that hype, excitement, euphoria around the entire space, which carried forward into NFTs. And like he said, 2021 was the year of the NFT, and things were just going off the rails. And so for him to come out at that time, at the peak, to say that 98 to 99% of these are going to go to zero, nobody was having any of it. So you can look back and think, yeah, it's pretty obvious, but it wasn't when he wrote this. So it's crazy. And so what I like is that he clarified that, hey, look, NFTs are not a fad. It's the opposite. They're here to stay. But just the way things are being created into a bubble, it's going to pop at some point. And so he was ahead of the curve on this again. All right. So what he's saying, why did I think things were going to go to zero? And he gives a few reasons here. One, he said there's too much supply. All right. There's simply too many projects. And what the nice thing about NFT projects is also what the bad thing is that there's a very low barrier to entry, which means that anyone can make them. And so if you've got some art and at the time there's a little bit of community around it, it's going to sell off. And while that's great to get people involved, it's not great to have long-term sustainability. So just the supply was too much, the demand wasn't there. Okay? And there are bubbles in everything, and he talks about, hey, here's a bubble just like it was in the tech bubble. That doesn't mean that the internet wasn't going to be useful. It just means at that time, many of the projects that were saying that they were .com businesses weren't actual businesses and went out of business. But if you look here, if you had invested $1,000 in Amazon's IPO as of May 1997, that $1,000 would have turned into almost 2.5 million. Almost 2.5 million. That's a crazy return. Now, would somebody have kept it for this long with all the ups and downs along the way? No. But the point here is that Amazon still made it through. They were one of the quality businesses. And because they made it through and showed that what, the type of business that they are, these are the returns that can happen when you go through a bubble and you are one of the last to stand. So he makes a good point there, all right? He also talks about short-term greed, why he was saying things were going to pop, all right? He went on to say that so many minds are focused on the next 45 days when all these incredible new technology changes create an opportunity to think in 45-year terms. So I want you to focus on that part again. Incredible new technology changes. NFTs, crypto, blockchain, many people wrap their heads around it. And the way that they do that is by saying it's just all about price point of cryptocurrencies, right? The next Dogecoin, the next Shiba coin, all this is lumped in the same category. And so it's nothing. It's a fad. But when you look at the underlying technology, that's the real portion that you need to get excited about. This other stuff is superficial things. But the real technology, the paradigm shift in the tech and what it allows people to do, that's where the excitement is. So I'm glad he highlighted that. He's like, lack of patience and short-term greed will shortchange a lot of people who had more potential. Always the case, still fascinating. So again, this is April of 2021, long before we're thinking about any type of dip in the market. Okay? And this next one is a response to someone saying, hey, this, it's very difficult to have organic growth. We need to create or cultivate an environment that's going to allow newbies to stay in the game and not get wiped out, so we can have that organic growth. So he responded to that. He said, I agree. Last part is what worried me, the organic part. Humans don't let organic happen when money is involved. It's so damn unfortunate, but short-term greed creates bubbles. Bubbles burst, and then the fun begins because we put the pieces back, and it's better than ever. Internet 98 to 2005. Man, I love what he says here. Okay, so while things have been wiped off the map, 99% of the projects have been wiped off the map. Even the quality ones have been hit hard. But it's in this time period when things are torn down that the real building begins to come back even stronger. And I'm glad that he highlighted it. And it is happening right now. Just nobody's focused on it because the prices aren't where people want them to be to actually focus. That FOMO is real. And so when we get back there, everyone's going to jump back in. But as of now, no one wants to even hear about NFTs, cryptos, or blockchain at all. So he goes on to say, short-term greed is bad for the NFT industry, but more importantly, it's bad for humans. Many fell for scams and lost money because of that. Others had their projects fail because of that, and they hurt their reputation in the process. In my opinion, greed is the biggest weakness in the NFT space right now. For me on this, see my Yahoo Finance. Okay, so here's the thing. So it's not even so much that people put in things blindly. That's half of it. A lot of it is the NFT founders. Sometimes it's not even a intentional scam where they're like, hey, give me the money, I'm gone. What happens is over the bull run, they get burnt out. And because they can't manage projects and they're not business operators, which he's going to go on to talk about, they burn out, they lose steam, and they leave. And then that project is kind of left for somebody else to pick up, hopefully. But do they run it well? Can they still support the community? And how much trust is lost in the process so that community doesn't continue on with the new owners? It's one of those things. So it's not always intentionally a scam, but it ends up, the outcome is the same for those on the other end of it, the consumer. All right? So we follow into the next point where he says another reason why he was saying that this was going to, the whole market was going to get wiped out was because we did not have good operators in the space. Now, something I touched on before, that there's such a low barrier to entry that anybody would come in. And while that also made the supply very high, it also brought in people who did not know how to run a business. There wasn't any focus on how to generate revenues and profits and keep it sustainable for the long run. And so because of that, good intentioned projects failed miserably because they just didn't know how to operate. And so he says something here that's very interesting about betting on the jockey and not the horse. And that's a very common phrase when it comes to the investing world. When a team or a single person comes and asks for some investment and they have a great idea, maybe they have a beautiful pitch deck or a presentation and all that kind of stuff, right? A lot of times the investment is actually not even happening on all the bells and whistles. Maybe not even so much in the problem that's being trying to solve. It's who's presenting it. What do they bring to the table? Right? Do you see something in them? Do they have something on paper with credentials or previous history or whatever it is? There's something about the team or that person that makes you want to give that money. Oftentimes people think it's because the idea is so great. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Who can execute? And so what you're doing is you're actually looking at the jockey, not the horse, right? To see if that execution can take place. So, same thing in the NFT world. And that's what I try and tell people. It's not that different from Web 2 or traditional companies. You are looking at those who are running the project. Are they going to execute? Can they execute? Have they done it before? You know, what's the track record? All these things that you're looking at. And that just wasn't there before. I will say this, because of the market being where it is today, you're actually getting more operators in the space because they understand the weak points of what happened during the bull run into this bear market, right? This crypto winter. And so the people who are here are actually operating a business. So they're more mature, they're more seasoned. And so these poor operators are now becoming more mature. Maybe they've even had scars from then and they've, you know, developed a business mindset or learned from those mistakes, and now they've become more mature. So that the poor operators are becoming better operators, and the space is actually attracting good operators. So here's his thing: is they say, okay, what's going to happen in 2023 and beyond? And his whole opinion here is that 2023 is still going to be a frosty time period, still a winter. Okay, it's not going to be hyped up like it was a year before. This is going to be slow to get back there, is what he's saying for 2023. But the underlying technology is still growing. The building that's happening in this space is still going. All right. And here's a big question that I always get as well, right? And people point to this as if it's like a negative. They're like, "Oh, I bet you don't want regulation in the space because that's what everybody." No, that's not the case. Just like he's saying, he's like, my stance on regulation has stayed the same. I'm thrilled with regulation. He grew up in a regulated industry. He did the wine industry, which is heavily regulated. And I didn't do the wine business, but I'm also excited for the regulation because it gives guidelines for people to execute. You can be a good operator all you want. If you don't know what's going to happen from a regulatory standpoint, it doesn't matter because you get wiped out even by doing the best things. So all of us who are serious in this space understand that for mass adoption to happen, you gotta have regulation. There's nothing wrong with that. I want that. But that clarity is missing. And so that's the main thing. It's not so much regulation as it is clarity. What are the no's? What are the yeses? What's out of bounds? What's in bounds? You need those for that innovation to continue to happen. Because the biggest scare is that you do something innovative, it works, and someone comes down on you and says you can't do it. So he goes on to say, well, the question is what brands or corporations are getting into NFTs? Now he mentions his own Vayner 3, and Gary Vee has done his own 2 projects, I believe, VeeFriends 1 and VeeFriends 2, and really built a solid community with a lot of utility into his projects, meaning you get, you know, access to his events and things like that he does. But I will say this, because he doesn't mention any other brands. You got Mercedes-Benz, you've got all the major sports coming in, right? You've already got UFC, you've got Major League Baseball, you've got NHL in there, you've got cricket in there, soccer's in there, or football, if you're watching this outside of North America, and you got National Football League, so American football. So like there is nothing that is not being transferred or transitioned into NFTs. Starbucks, you got the biggest brands, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Pepsi. I mean, everyone and anyone is on this train now. And the train has already left the station. You cannot pull it back. And every brand is going to incorporate NFTs in some way, shape, or form, or they'll be left behind. So he goes on to say, what advice do you have for people who have been invested in NFTs over the last 2 years who are now scared of where the market is going? And I love it. I love his advice here because it applies to the entire market or any investment, really. He's got several responses. A, you don't lose money on an NFT until you actually sell it. This is, investing 101. Your gains and your losses are paper gains and paper losses until you sell. So whatever, in the negative you are for any particular NFT, it hurts, but it's not realized until you get rid of it. So that's one. But he goes on to say that you might actually want to sell an NFT for a loss because you're offsetting other capital gains. So from a tax perspective, if you've done very well and you're profitable on certain things, you may want to take that loss and then you can offset that for your taxes. All right. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a tax specialist, and nor is this financial advice, but it is something that you can do, provided you know exactly what you're doing. All right. And then he's like, okay, if you are so about that life and about NFTs and the blockchain and all committed to this, you don't bail just because of 8 bad months. He goes on to say, I've had 8 bad seasons with the Jets and counting. He's talking about the New York Jets in the National Football League. And he's like, I didn't leave. Yeah, they're going to be bad for a very long time. So, and may never be good. Who knows? But he's right. Like, if you're in this to be in this, it's okay if there's a little bit of pain now. Everything that you've done now that has been painful from a monetary standpoint is a learning lesson. And so trying to get out of things just to leave the space because you've been hurt, I mean, where's the accountability there? If you're in it, you understand it's the technology that's the play, and you learn from the mistakes that you made and apply them forward. So he's like, here's another reason that you, for people who are scared, what they should do. And he's like, if you're looking to put more capital into play, learn from the mistakes and successes of the last 18 months, and really reread this entire blog post one more time. Pay attention to the operator. And if you don't know Gary Vee very well, as much as he is a marketing person or persona, he really prides himself on being an operator. And so I understand why he says pay attention to the operator. It's 100% true. In any business, in any industry, in any market, the ones who typically survive the longest and do the best are the ones who are the greatest operators. Forget the bells and whistles, forget the marketing campaigns, the glitz and the glamour. It's the operations of that project or business. And I'm going to put those two together because NFTs are a business. That project is a business and has to be run like that. So learn from the mistakes, try and figure out who are good operators, observe them for a while, and then invest your money. And then he's like, hey, look, if you haven't bought anything, you haven't sold anything, don't leave the space, right? Spend the time over the next year learning and understand why the excitement is legit, but it's underneath the price point craze that happened a year ago. All right. So he's like, there are many companies that I follow for 3 years before I buy their stock. So you can apply the same time frame or somewhat of the same time frame, or at least the mindset that I'm just going to observe these people. There are certain NFT projects I have on my watch list I've had for the past 18 to 20 months. And I'll continue to watch them and see what they're doing. How engaged are they? Do they continue to communicate with the community during downtimes, not just uptimes? And you just watch that. So now as the next time the next wave rides up again, I know these guys are going to be there because it's a lot easier to do that in the good times than the bad times. So if they were there supporting their community in the bad times, more often than not, they're going to be there during the good times. And he goes on, here's I'm going to end on this point. I like this. He's like, why I'm empathetic to NFT critics. It's like, we get scared of what we didn't grow up with. That's just what humans do, or human beings do. And I find that, I mean, it's so simple, right? If you were in the era before phones, before the internet, you looked at those sideways. They were suspicious. They were fads that weren't going to make it, especially smartphones. No one thought that you were going to transition the power of your desktop and all of your focus and attention and activities from your desktop to your phone. And that's after it took us a while to accept the internet itself. And it's just human nature. What we didn't grow up with, we just push it aside and say, no, this is a fad. And NFTs fit that perfectly. He goes on to say why. He goes, NFTs are not a fad. Certain projects in the NFT world are fads. No different than Beanie Babies were a fad, but stuffed animals have been a century-long obsession. And that's the thing. You gotta look at the entire space versus specific projects. That's it. Right? Not every tech stock is going to do well. Doesn't mean tech stocks don't work. Not every startup is going to do well, but that doesn't mean you can't invest in startups because it's never going to work. Yeah, certain ones will. Not every NFT project is bad. The technology is not bad just because some or most of the projects died out. You know, and he's just like, look, for the rest of us, I love this quote. I think this is great. I'm going to use this one. He's like, for the rest of us, we'll just keep running marathons while everyone wants to know who won the 100-meter dash. I thought this is great because it's true, right? Especially in crypto where things are so accelerated. You know, anything that's like a year in crypto is like 3 to 5 years in traditional space. It moves so quick. So what he's saying is we're playing the long game. Even though crypto moves at an accelerated pace, we are still playing the long game, but everyone is focused on the 100-meter dash. And we're playing that marathon. I love it. It's such a mentality difference. And this is why he wins more often than he loses. At least exponentially wins versus his losses. And he finishes off saying NFTs aren't going anywhere. I still believe they're here to stay forever. So I know, here's the funny thing, I know every time I do a video about NFTs, it gets the least amount of views, the least amount of engagement. 100%. And this probably will fall into that. But if you are watching this to this point, I would love if you subscribe and leave a comment, at least so that it tells me that people are paying attention to the NFT market. And whether you are fully on board, brand new, or you're a seasoned person in this space, we all need to play the long game. We all need to be in the marathon. And don't worry about the 100-meter dash.